to AI Home Podcast, the first podcast for real estate resources and independent living strategies for the disability community. Why? Because accessibility is home. Hi, I'm Angela Fox, blogger and author of My Blue Front Door. The height of the housing market season usually ends sometime in the fall, depending on your location. Less houses are on the market, and bad winter weather can easily make your house hunting adventure come to a dead stop. Going to homes under the sunny sky of the summer and the long daylight hours of the day are much easier conditions to find that new home. I wouldn't entirely disagree. It would only be completely true if the only effort you needed was visiting houses. But if you have gone through house hunting before, or know others who have done so, visiting the homes is only half of what you need to do. There are a million things you have to prep for, and another million things you need to do once your bid has been accepted. Things like getting your finances in order, working with your bank for a pre-approval letter, finding that right realtor, and your wish list for your new home are just large buckets of prep work needed. Doing these things at the same time as house hunting can not only burn you out, it is also a recipe for a bad house hunting experience. So avoid the ease of just looking at houses without doing your prep and homework, at least for the long-term strategy. The end of and the beginning of the new year is the perfect time to prepare yourself in buying a new home. That might seem too far in advance or overkill. I get it. You may be living in a home that's not accessible because you just recently became disabled and you need to find a loan to modify it now. Or you may have to move for a variety of reasons and need a new accessible home. I understand that life doesn't happen on your own timetable. I just caution that doing everything at once in a short time frame only works if everything goes right the first time, which is not likely because you will need time to think through things and limit conflict that will occur in an inaccessible world. If you still are not sold, I will recommend you buying my book on Amazon called My Blue Front Door. It will give you an overview of things you need to think about to buy and have an accessible home for a person with a mobility or physical disability. It is also my story about my own home buying experience as a wheelchair user during the 2008 recession, which may repeat itself if the economic crisis from the COVID isn't addressed soon, I'm afraid. Despite having a potential recession, things will still be different in the housing market from the lessons learned. And history does repeat itself, but it's not a mirror. Things do change no matter the similarities. One thing that has changed is your credit score. Understanding your credit score is one of those million things I have mentioned and is an easy thing to start preparing, especially since the formula that determines your credit score is going to change. With the holiday festivities here, many of you may find yourself spending more than you usually do, going on holiday travel, buying those presents, decorations, and usually during this time frame, your credit score always takes a hit as a result. That may be true under the traditional FICO score formula called FICO 9, one of the major credit score formulas out there used in lending. But with the FICO 10 that was announced in January of 2020, that may not be true. But before we go into exactly what are the changes, I need to say that I'm not a financial advisor or giving you advice. I also would like to talk about why we even have a credit score to try and demystify the idea a bit. Before modern times, your store credit was really based on your relationship with the store owner or your reputation within the community. The idea that a person's word was good enough and deals were sealed with a handshake was used as its own credit formula in a way. Well, that didn't always work. Eventually, however, through modern record keeping, there was a way to look at a person's financial circumstances and reduce the chances of fraud as a result. Whether you believe that is the intent of today's credit score formulas is an entirely different conversation. But the fact remains is that it is meant to reduce fraud and increase transparency. So, for example, in FICO 9, which was created in 2014, mainly in response as a result of the years of the recession. It changed from FICO 8 to FICO 9. Now, in January 2020 again, it was announced that a new FICO score formula, FICO 10 again, was intended to roll out in the spring. The change came about in response to changes of the American population spending habits post-recession. Ultimately, the new formula still looks at the same buckets of financial information, which are payment history, amounts owed, length of credit history, and new credit. They just emphasize different parts of it now. Once the economy started to recover and the population was gainfully employed, the credit card debt was still something lingering around as a harsh reminder of the bad times. Interest rates for personal loans, however, were still historically low and created a spike in applications as a result. Credit card consumers used these personal loans to consolidate all debt and pay off the high-interest credit cards. It saved consumers thousands of dollars because the interest rate for personal loans was significantly lower than the credit cards. Nothing new no matter what the decade you are in, because credit cards were meant for short-term and low debt, not used as traditional loan to pay off over several years, but unfortunately the recession caused many to use them in such a way. Many would ask why this would be a catalyst to change the credit score formula. It could be because once the credit cards were cleared, it didn't stop consumers from using them again in addition with the loan. But under the old credit card score formula, it might not trigger anything. So under the FICO 9 formula, the old one, it only pulls your income and debt you have for that month to create your actual score, which should not be mistaken with your actual credit report itself. Simply, the credit score is literally a snapshot and in theory would represent generally what your financial spending habits are like, in theory. But of course, looking at the month could make it look better if you have just cleared your credit card debt through that personal loan. Hence, that's why it started triggering, and on top of the fact that there has been a historical spike in personal loans compared to, a few decades ago. And now a quick break from our sponsor. So as you can see and also hearing me, I am sitting on my back deck and I have my grill. I love being out in my back deck. I hate when I forget something and I have to wheel back into the house, particularly my cell phone. However, I'm excited to announce that another disabled-owned business, Cush Pocket, has come up with a solution by creating this fabulous wheelchair bag. I love this bag and have been a proud customer since almost the very beginning. Why do I like it? 1, it's huge. 2, it comes in multiple colors. But 3, you can put it anywhere on the base of your wheelchair. How does that happen? It's attached to the flap and it has little Velcro. You put it directly underneath your cushion of your wheelchair. And the Velcro and the weight of your body ensures that this fabulous Cush Pocket bag certainly will not move. I personally have 2 directly in front of me and it hides behind my legs, and I love that because it's so much more convenient. Trust me, you will never forget anything ever again. So as you can see down below, I have a direct link for Cush Pocket, and if you use my code Angela Fox, you will get $1 off. And not only will you get a fabulous bag, but you'll also support 2 disabled-owned businesses, Cush Pocket and my business, Horizontal Houses. Check it out. The new FICO Score 10 now looks at the past 2 years, which would show the personal loan and whether you start to add debt to those credit cards you just cleared. Now, this may seem disappointing, and I get it. If you are in a position of needing to shuffle your debt and take advantage of lower interest rates through personal loans, the new formula is not a good thing for you. But when it comes to unique moments of time, like holiday spending or purchase of a home, you will not be penalized. The formula does not put much weight for short-term unusual spending because now greater weight is made by looking at the past 2 years. So don't be concerned that when this new formula that your score will be doomed from enjoying your holiday or getting a new home. It is a must before and after that matter. At the time of this podcast, I cannot find whether or not FICO 10 formula has actually been used this year. There has been only indications that delays have occurred as a result of updates needed in a variety of systems. If you do know, please reach out and let me know whether or not the FICO 10 formula has been implemented nationwide. It will be interesting that with the COVID crisis and its economic impact, whether this formula will be obsolete even before it's adopted. It's a major change, right? Without knowing if this new score formula will be implemented, it's important to be prudent. How can you be prudent, you may say? Well, simply, you need to look at your credit score and your credit report. You can ensure that your credit report is truly representative to what you have done in the past 2 years. You should first look at all 4 credit bureaus to see the spread of your credit scores, which are Equifax, Experian, TransUnion, and FICO. You won't know what credit bureau your lender will rely on, but it's usually the score that's in the middle of the others. To actually find your credit score is usually free for most websites. I have used Credit Karma. Be mindful if you use your credit card company or bank, which sometimes offers your score for free. It is usually more reserved in the score they provide you. I once had a friend who was relying on her bank's credit score when she logged into a credit card account. When she started to work with a broker to buy her first home, all the credit bureaus scored her much higher than her own credit card company. She was told it is a practice for credit card companies to be more reserved in the scoring. So just keep that in mind. Again, the scores are not the report itself. It will not have all the details about your income and debt that you will also need to review because your lender will be looking at it. Please do not pay for your report, as you can obtain a free report from each of the credit bureaus once a year. Go to www.annualcreditreport.com. That's annualcreditreport.com. Since the purpose of you obtaining the report is for an early scrub, I recommend pulling only about 2 of the credit bureaus immediately. Then, when you get closer to when you are ready to get pre-approval letter after you select the right lender, you have another free credit report you could look at. Yes, there could be things different, but it is less likely if you have already looked at the 2 other bureaus. However, it is your call. You can always pay for another copy from all credit bureaus if you want to review it again within the same year. My personal finances, however, wouldn't change much in 6 months, and therefore it seemed to work out just fine. If you have any questions at all about your credit report, the Federal Trade Commission is the best place to start. They have videos about pulling your credit report. Their website is www.ftc.gov. That's www.ftc.gov. What should you look for when you actually get the reports? There are a million different checklists and articles out there from attorneys and financial bloggers, which I have reviewed myself. I recommend relying, however, on more neutral and credible resources like the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which you can be found at www.cfpb.gov. cfpb.gov. After all, CFPB was literally created. The agency was created as a direct result to protect consumers from corrupting lending practices and educate consumers on their rights. Primarily, it came from the housing market, bad loan practices. Right now, they are working to educate consumers on their rights under the COVID for mortgage relief programs. You can also find complaints on a variety of consumer products, so you can also look into that as well. Between FTC and CFPB are my two go-to websites to fact-check lenders and even realtors when it comes to the financing aspect of my mortgage or home equity loans. I will put the checklist on my blog. A note here, my blog is about to change its name. It will become www.horizontal-homes.com. However, at the end of this podcast, the old name will be provided, but both names you could Google and it will still get you there. Just a FYI. I will admit that the CFPB checklist is a lot. And so I'm going to just try to do my best and paraphrase what you should generally look at. But please look at the checklist. It is really helpful. But in general, what should you look for? You need to first make sure the report you have pulled is actually you. I know that sounds funny, but with identity fraud, you never know. So meaning you need to make sure that your official name is correct with the associated social security number. You also need to look at your past 3 addresses or addresses that you've lived in the last 5 years. Are they accurate and true? The same thing for your employment record. All are likely to be okay. That's the easy stuff. It gets trickier when it comes to debt, right? Because debt is just a ugly and sensitive thing. What you need to look for this, and you need to look whether both your current debt and your old debt are correct. For example, I have been paying a large loan over the course of 5 years, and every year when I pull my report, when I still owed the money, the loan showed up and it was showing up that I was paying it off, but the debt was still there. However, wouldn't you know, year number 6, a year after I had paid for the loan, it disappeared. No credit for paying the large loan. My credit score did not jump from year 5 to year 6, which also gave me an indication that I wasn't getting any credit for it. It wasn't just that it just didn't show up on the report. It wasn't impacting my credit in a positive manner like it should have. So that's an example of looking at old versus new debt. Debt that you have currently and debt that you have paid off, okay? Now, you need to look more closely at debt collection companies if it shows up on your report, because that's a doozy. Because there are some bills that you may have failed to pay for. Maybe you didn't get notice. Maybe they didn't contact you in the correct manner. And eventually, when the money is not paid, it gets transferred over to these debt collectors, all right? So you need to really pay attention to those items and figure out what kind of debt it is and whether or not they actually properly informed you whether you had the ability to pay it before it showed up on your credit report. Now, because the audience listening to this podcast are most likely my disability community, let's talk about medical bills. So, according to the CFPB, medical bills can show up if the debt is transferred to a debt collection company. In fact, the agency has said that 1 out of 5 reports have debt collections on their credit report because of medical bills. 1 out of 5 people, so you're not alone. And in 2014, CFPB started to require debt collection companies to provide certain information how they handle these type of medical bills or medical debt collection after the agency received numerous complaints from consumers about the confusing process in figuring out how to resolve the debt. Basically, consumers were getting the runaround. Imagine that, right? They were getting a runaround between insurance companies, hospitals, doctors' offices, and the actual debt collecting companies themselves. It might be helpful if you find yourself in the situation that you have a debt collection as a result of medical bills to visit CFPB, the agency, for what must be reported by these debt collecting companies to help you have a more educated conversation with them. After all, the agency is asking debt collecting companies to provide this information to basically help provide guidelines to consumers on how to rectify, as well as helping the debt collectors in having proper communications. And so it just might be helpful to know that thing, to know what is being asked for, and see if that helps you at all. The last thing you might want to look into is on your actual report, besides what I've just spoken about, is hard inquiries. So what are hard inquiries? Hard inquiries are when you are you're looking into perhaps getting a new credit card, a new personal loan, more debt, whatever case may be. And so what they might want to do, that company might want to look into your report themselves to let you know what kind of interest rate or terms you might have. All right. Now, what is tricky is that you may be thinking that you're having a preliminary discussion, just like, hey, here's how much money I make, here's my general debt, and let me know what I might get as interest rates, all right, or what might be the terms. Some companies actually, they'll want to actually pull your report to give you something concrete, and they have to verbally ask for your permission. What the tricky part is, and I fell for this myself, right? And I'm a lawyer. I was looking to consolidate and refinance my student loans, and I went online, and so I'm just typing things up, and I'm thinking it's just a preliminary thing. And I didn't read the fine print. That's all bad on me. And I clicked on it. I got the interest rate, and then I realized, a couple months later when I pulled the report, that they actually ran my report. And so I got a hard inquiry. Now, don't worry, these hard inquiries only hit your score, nominal, but they stay around for forever, it seems like. There is a time window, look into it, and make sure that they get taken off. I have find that outside of good debt, meaning debt that has just disappeared because you paid it, and you're not getting credit for it. Besides that, I find these hard inquiries are kind of those things that are not only sneaky, that come up on you, but may not get off your report when they legally need to do so. So look into that. It won't change phenomenally about your score, but you know what? Every point may count, right? So look into that. So in recap for the reports, generally speaking, again, look at the CFPB checklist, which goes into much detail than what I talked about. But you certainly want to verify that the report is labeling you correct, that there's no identity fraud by having the right social security number, the right home addresses and employment addresses. You also want to look into whether or not what kind of debt is being reported. Be mindful of those debt collecting companies. Those are big things that really kind of sunk your score. And then last is those hard inquiries that I mentioned. So things happen, and it's hard to believe that when a new formula is implemented nationwide, that errors will occur. So again, that's why you want to kind of look into it as well. It's not just to be prudent, but this is a new formula, and if it's going to be implemented nationwide, there could be just simple computer errors as well. Having the report scrubbed and cleaned before the formula is in play will also help clean up any of those computer errors. You can pull it up and say, hey, you know what, before this really got implemented, this is what I had. Let's see where are the differences. If you are wanting to improve your financial health and have the space right now to do so, great. There are a number of nonprofit consumer credit helplines. And this is another, prep thing that you can do ahead of time versus later. As I stated in my book, My Blue Front Door, the Maryland Home Ownership for People with Disabilities loan program required all applicants to go through such a financial counseling service as part of the application process. So not only can it help, if you're in a spot that you think it can improve your financial health right now, also, some loans may require you to go through it even if you are in good health and your score is phenomenal. They still the thing you have to check off. So that just kind of depends on your loan, but like I said, it can be very helpful to to improve your financial health, even if the loan is not require you to go through such those counseling. And doing it before you go through the loan program, again, it makes it much, much easier. With all this talk about credit scores can leave you probably feeling right now like it's like a do or die. I mean, it's probably no rocket science to you. You've heard, TV talk about it, commercials and things. But just remember, yes, there are certain credit scores that lenders require, but it's usually set for most people to qualify. They don't want the cream of the cream. Because they are in the business themselves as well, right? To make money by lending you money, right? So just keep that in mind. What does differ is what kind of interest rate you pay, meaning that over the course of the mortgage itself, over 30 years, you will pay a lot more. But your monthly payment, because it is spread usually for 30 years, or if you do a home equity loan for 15, because it's spread out over so many years, usually the monthly payment is not large enough that you can't afford it in most cases. I always stress financial responsibility by trying to pay less and not more, trying to pay early. But having a home that works for you could be one of those exceptions to this rule, meaning that if, yes, your credit score is not where you want it to be right now, you can't qualify for the loan, whether it's for a modification or to buy that new home. Certainly, look at monthly payments, and it just might be okay to say, you know what, instead of waiting another year, if I can't even wait another year to try and get more financial stability, maybe it just might be prudent to go ahead and get that home. Because if you are a person with a disability, the world around you is not accessible. And so the one thing you can't control is what's in your own home. So that's why I kind of make that as an exception to the norm, if you get my drift. Now, normally I will segue into my next portion of the podcast called On the Top Shelf. On the Top Shelf, I started out with as a way to review products that will make your life easier in the home. Whether it's something to help grab things off the floor or whatever the case may be. However, I'm going to be tabling that portion of the podcast, not just here, but for the inevitable future. I just need to right now take a step back. It's not my full-time job doing this podcast, and just trying to provide you more timely, quality material. Now, that doesn't mean that from time to time I might come across a great product and be like, man, let me talk about it and review it for my audience, because this little gizmo is something that if you're living independently, you might definitely want to have if you are a person with a mobility or physical disability. So I can't say never. For right now, though, On the Top Shelf, it's going to be scrubbed. If you really want me to do it, please reach out to me. I certainly will do that as much as possible. And hopefully, if I get another year underneath my belt with a podcast, I might be able to start doing that again. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope that this will get you jump-started and not worry about the holiday spending. And for those who do celebrate the holidays, I want to say a Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, whatever your spiritual faith, and I hope that while you may be distant from your family members because of the COVID, hopefully you're able to visit safely through Zoom, or you have already made plans and you've done the self-quarantine and you're ready to rock and roll. So happy holidays, everybody, and thank you for listening. In conclusion, I want to remind everyone listening that it takes a village to make a change. Nothing can live just within ourselves. So I invite you to join my Facebook page, Accessibility is Home, to ask your questions about real estate and independent living concerns for your disability. Or, better yet, just share your success stories. And please use the hashtag #HomesForDisabled on all of your social media networks. Don't forget to join my Instagram and Twitter at DoorMyBlue, which is short for the title of my book on Amazon called My Blue Front Door. I have also created a website for my book, blog, and of course this podcast, which can be found at www.angelafoxbooks.com. Please don't forget to check out my free handouts and interesting articles on my blog's website. So thank you for listening to this podcast because accessibility is home.